Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to talk about pedigrees, especially autosomal pedigrees. So first, what is a pedigree? A pedigree is like a family tree, but it shows the inheritance of a specific trait along the family members. And this is the pedigree. Okay, so as I mentioned before that we are studying the inheritance of a specific trait. So some people are going to be carrying that trait and others are not. Okay, so for example here the unshaded circle is going to be the female not showing the trait, and the unshaded square is going to be the male not showing the trait, and the shaded circle is going to be the female showing the trait, and the shaded square is going to be the male showing the trait. Here, the horizontal line between a female and a male is going to be it's going to be showing the marriage between them, and the bracket is going to be showing the children. And each row is a generation that is represented by a Roman number. So for example, this row is the first generation that is represented by I. And this row is the second generation that is represented by double I, and so on. Here it's going to be triple I, and here IV. Okay. So as we're studying the inheritance of a trait along the pedigree, so we are going to find that some traits are dominant and other are recessive. So how can we know that this trait is dominant or recessive? Okay, so the general rule is going to have some exceptions like all the rules. Okay, so the first rule is if the trait skipped any generation, then the trait is recessive, as it is shown here that in the second generation, as it is shown here that there were no people showing the trait, which means that this trait in this pedigree is going to be a recessive trait. And the second rule is if the trait did not skip any generation, then this trait is a dominant trait. If it appeared in all the generations, this means that it is a dominant trait, okay? As it is shown here in this pedigree, that it is shown in all the generations, so it is a dominant trait. Okay, so the exception is unless the pedigree proves the opposite, okay? This point is very important because sometimes a trait can be shown in all the generations, but still this trait is a recessive. So how are we going to know that this trait is recessive or dominant? Okay, so here, first we're going to know if this trait is dominant or recessive. So here, this trait appeared in the first, second, and third generation. This means that this trait is a dominant trait, okay? So let's check if it is really a dominant trait or a recessive trait. So since we said that it is a dominant trait, this means that all the shaded people are going to be carrying either heterozygous genotype or homozygous dominant. So if we represented this trait by the letter R, so the shaded people are going to have either R capital R small or R capital R capital. And all the unshaded people are going to carry the trait R small R small R small. All the unshaded people are going to carry R small, R small. Yes, so for example, if we took double I2 as an example, so it will be carrying the genotype R capital, R small, or R capital, R capital. And if we took I1 and I2 as an example, it will carry the genotype R small, both of them. Yes, so is it possible that two recessive parents get a dominant kid? Let's see here. Wait a minute. Okay. Let's see here. Here there are two recessive parents crossed in this Punnett square, and they got 100% recessive kids. So this cannot be applied here. This means that two recessive parents cannot get a dominant kid. This means that this trait is not dominant. It should be a recessive trait because two recessive parents cannot get a dominant kid. So which means that all the unshaded people are going to carry either R capital R small or R capital R capital, and all the shaded people are going to carry the genotype R small R small. So double I2 are going to have R small and I1 and I2 are going to have R capital R small or R capital R capital. Okay. So how are we going to know if it is heterozygous or homozygous dominant? Okay, so let's first cross two homozygous dominant together. So R capital crossed with R capital in this Punnett square will get all dominant kids, which is not applied here in this pedigree. So this cross cannot be applied here, so this is not correct. If we crossed a heterozygous with a homozygous dominant, it will get also 100% dominant, which is also not applied here in this pedigree. But if we crossed a heterozygous with a heterozygous, as it is shown here in this last Punnett square, it will get 75% dominant and 25% recessive, which is the only possibility which is the only possible genotypes that can be crossed together to get two dominant parents get a recessive kid. Okay, so here the final answer will be I1 will be R capital R small, and I2 will be R capital R small, and double I2 is going to be R small R small. Okay, and this trait is a recessive trait. Yes. Okay. Here, so what is the exception? Okay, what is the exception? If a trait doesn't skip any generation, then it is a dominant trait. Yes, as we said before. But here, unless this inheritance is shown in this pedigree, this inheritance, two unshaded parents get a shaded kid. If we saw this inheritance, then this trait is automatically a recessive trait. Two unshaded parents get a shaded kid. Then this trait is a recessive trait. Okay, recessive trait. Okay, let's solve the first question. As we said before, that in this pedigree, this trait is a recessive trait. Okay, so let's answer the question based on the pedigree in figure 1. Which of the following best explains the observed pattern of inheritance? Okay, A trait is autosomal dominant. No. The trait is autosomal recessive. Yes, maybe. The trait is sex-linked dominant. No, we didn't take أصلا sex-linked. The trait is sex-linked recessive. No. So which means that B is the correct answer, but let's complete reading it. The trait is autosomal recessive because the cross between individual I1 here, okay, and I2 produced an affected offspring, which is double I2. Yes. Okay, so here, now wait a minute. Here, the final answer is B. Okay. In the pedigree above, squares represent males and squares represent males and circles represent females, individuals who express a particular trait are represented by shaded figures. Which of the following patterns of inheritance best explains the transmission of the trait? Okay, so here, this pedigree, the trait is shown at the first, second, and third generation. It appeared in all the generations, and is it shown two unshaded parents got a shaded kid? Let's see here. Here, no, no, and no. So this trait is really a dominant trait. So let's see. The only type we took in the pedigree is autosomal pedigree, so the answer can either be C or D, and we said it is a dominant trait, so it will be autosomal dominant, which is D. Okay, and here it is a question that you can solve it by yourself for more practice. Thank you.